Hi, this is Chris with the Rural Route Podcast, and I'm here with Joy Powers. She is running for House of Delegates.
I'm running for House of Delegates in District 51, which includes half of Bedford, half of Campbell, and a quarter of Pennsylvania County.
Many people in Southwest Virginia say that while they want to stay here, they feel forced to leave to find good paying jobs. What is your plan to create employment opportunities that will keep people here and attract newcomers?
Actually, my campaign is built on the home plan, and the O in that home plan is actually opportunity, and it's specifically designed for that. As a former FFA and 4-H advisor, it really hurt me to see my young people that we mentor and work with grow up and then have to leave with the hopes of being successful. So I think that we have to really value apprenticeships programs and things like that, but the state has to be a better partner in facilitating that. So what I would like to see is them invest in education and career and technical education, but also we want to invest in things like tax credits for companies who hire local. And then when we are bringing these industries in and we're investing in tax dollars into industries, we need to make sure that part of that stipulation is that the talent that they're hiring with our tax dollars is local to the community.
And with the industries changing quickly, especially with technology, how will you ensure that our workforce has access to the training and reskilling programs that match the jobs for the future?
I'm a product of career and technical education. I grew up learning how to weld and use a router in high school, and so we hear a lot of anecdotal evidence like that about the importance of career and technical education. But the thing about it is almost every economic development director in the state will tell you that we are still at a shortage of hard skills. And so it really takes going back and investing in those hard skills and in career and technical education, because the lack of investment from the state has really almost promoted the stigmatization around blue-collar working, good-paying jobs. And we have to correct that at the state level.
What specific changes or investments would you push for in our K through 12 and community college systems to better prepare students for both college and the high demand economy?
Absolutely. So I think that from the very beginning, we have to acknowledge where we are in our education. So Virginia actually invests on average $1,900 less than other states. And so our graduates are already graduating at a deficit. And so we have to correct that. And the first step of that is correcting the formula and how we dictate and dedicate education dollars in Virginia. And so that needs to be corrected to where it's not on a community capita base where our districts, our rural districts, are so disadvantaged in those funding formulas. So we have to correct the funding formula first, and to where we're making sure that we're investing in our children, not just in larger, broader scheme funding approaches. But here's the other thing, is we cannot forget school infrastructure. So over half of our schools in the state are over 40 years old. That's a big problem, and it's something we have to address now.
Many residents, especially in rural areas, struggle to access public programs and services due to lack of transportation, changes in technology, or red tape. How will you make sure these services are more accessible and easier to use?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's an important problem that we have to address, because in a time where these services are being cut, we have to acknowledge that they really weren't doing a great job in rural communities to begin with. And so we need to come back and we need to make a people-focused policy. And so instead of looking at to see how do we need to adjust the existing policy we have now, we need to go back to the person and say, how do we serve this family? How do we serve this community? And so I think that's why really promoting people and having a standard of care across the Commonwealth. What I would love to see is the Commonwealth have a standard response time and a standard of care that we provide our citizens. And so that way, the single most determining factor of whether you survive a heart attack in the Commonwealth should not be your zip code. That's policy failure, and it needs to be corrected.
Broadband access is still limited in many parts of the state. How would you address internet and infrastructure gaps to level the playing field for students, job seekers, and businesses?
Yeah. Broadband has kind of become a buzzword in politics, especially rural politics. And I would like to change that back, and I would like to make it just connectivity, because when we're talking about broadband, we're really limiting, and we're siphoning ourselves into a kind of a corner. The conversation really needs to be, how do we connect Southwest Virginia in a way that makes them more equipped an industry, but also safer. These are emergency services that we have to make sure we have. And so what I would like to see is us look at these communities on a base-by-base basis. Is some places in Southwest Virginia, broadband's not going to work. In my community, Bedford, it works great. We're probably reach 100% capacity in the next few years. It's one of that has some of the best coverage. The reason why we haven't seen that same coverage in other places is, one, been a lack of planning, but two, it's underground wire doesn't work everywhere. So we have to refocus and make sure that our citizens are the focus of whatever decision we're making, not the broadband contractors or whoever's in Richmond, but we have to bring it back to the needs of the people.
What would you do to ensure that every resident can access affordable health care without having to travel long distances or face long wait times?
Yeah, so I mentioned my legislative plan is called the Home Plan, and the H in that starts with healthcare, because Virginia is not a good home if we don't have healthcare. We have to have a universal healthcare standard and a state option, and I really believe that we can expand cardinal care to do that. I would like us to look at successful models like Michigan, who's been able to enact that well, and be able to leverage the federal dollars that we do have, but also be able to look at the healthcare system overall to see how we make sure that no Virginians get left behind. But I think that a state option, universal option, is the answer.
And would your plan also help to address the problem of the shortage of doctors, nurses, and mental health providers in rural communities?
Absolutely. I think that one of the things that we have to look at moving forward is a healthcare gap, but specifically with our aging Virginians. And this is something I'm really passionate about. I think that if a community is only as strong and as good as it is when they take care of their elderly and their children. And so when 1 in 5 of Virginians are going to be over the age of 65 by 2030, and we have entire 100 square mile radiuses where we don't have a single geriatric health provider with a vacancy, that's a huge issue. We know these nursing home cuts are coming down. We know home health cuts are coming down. And so how are we going to take care of our aging population? So I think that our shortage of doctors and nurses is huge, but specifically within that aging population, it has to be addressed now.
When you picture Southwest Virginia 10 years from now, what do you see and how will your policies help get us there?
I believe that whatever policy is enacted in Southwest Virginia should reflect the community, the culture, and the industry in Southwest Virginia. We have people in Richmond, in Washington, who see Appalachia as a land of opportunity. And if they're not from here, if they don't understand that, that's a threat. Okay, we know the value here, but we've also know the history here. We know what happens when industry comes in and they just take, and they don't give back. So what I would love to see is Appalachia finally and Southwest Virginia finally get the credit and the resources they deserve. And so I would like to see more investment into agriculture that works here. I would like to see more investment into energy that works here. But I would also like to see us really invest in our schools, our education. And I think that career and technical education is a big part of that. But it's got to be the right career and technical education to make sure it leads to profitable, good jobs.
Voters are often frustrated with politicians who make promises but fail to deliver. How will you ensure that your work in Richmond truly reflects the needs and voices of your constituents?
I think that right now is a time where we're all frustrated with politics, with the parameters that our politicians, even the ones we like, have to work within. And so what do we do? And so for me, I think the important parts is, one, staying true to who I am, but also I'm not a politician. I'm doing this and I'm running for office because I love my community and I love my people. And I like to say that I'm a Democrat. I'm a Democrat who's running in a district with a 52-point red lane. But I'm a Democrat who is a people-first Democrat. And I think a lot of us are. But when people ask me, especially Republicans, they say, what does that mean? And I say, well, that means that I'll tell off a Democrat that'll screw us over just as fast as I'll tell off a Republican who'll screw us over. And I think that at the end of the day, I have to make sure that my community is one that, my family's been farming in District 51 for over 200 years. I want my son to be able to farm there for another 100 more. So what do we have to do to make that not just possible, but make it profitable, make it happy, make it successful? And I want to see my neighbors thrive too, even the ones that voted red. So I think that's important.
Supporters of small modular reactors. say that they will create jobs, but opponents worry about safety, cost, storage of waste. Where do you stand on SMRs for Southwest Virginia?
I think that energy is always going to be a big topic, and it has to be a big topic. One, and this is, I know your question was about specifically about SMRs, but I think that every conversation about energy has to include that we are overburdening Virginians and our electric grid with data centers. You know, when you have 80% of our electricity and energy goes to feed data centers, that is an astronomical amount, you know. And so first, I think that we need to correct maybe the need and the draw from our grid to really ask ourselves are these SMRs necessary in every place? Do we really want to continue to put them in our Commonwealth just because, you know, some guy in Richmond's getting campaign kickbacks? And that's the reality of the situation. But then when we move past that is we have to be smart about energy. And so my first and foremost thing is, you know, there's people on both sides of the aisle that support SMRs, and I know that. But I think the first part about it is we need to go back and we need to look at the legislation that Glenn Youngkin vetoed last session. Because there was legislation that said, hey, if SMRs are coming in, they should be legally required to tell communities what the impact's going to be. Regardless of what the local board of supervisors said, there should be a burden to that company to let the citizens know. And I fully support that. I think that we should do that in solar, we should do that in SMRs, and we should do that data centers across the board. And if we do that, I think that we're going to really see a correction in a lot of these things that when people really understand what the impacts of these communities are, they'll be better equipped to make a decision. But I'm never, ever for holding back details and the impacts of these things, because we have to remember that SMRs don't go away. You know, they're going to be here for my son's grandkids. And I think that's something that we really have to consider.
And if someone wanted to learn more about your campaign or volunteer to help your campaign, how could they do that?
Absolutely. If folks want to learn more about my campaign or volunteer, they can check out joyforvirginia.com. They can learn more about my home plan, which addresses healthcare, opportunity, market affordability, and education, because I believe that all Virginians are owed a good home. Thanks.